If you've ever heard the name Asebu Amenfi, then you've probably also heard the whispers, the stories that he wasn't just any ordinary man, but a giant. A giant so powerful, so unusual in his appearance, that people believed he was born with something beyond human strength. But Asebu Amenfi wasn't just a man of muscle. According to oral tradition, he also carried deep spiritual powers that made him feared, respected, and remembered for centuries. Now, the tale of Asebu doesn't start in Ghana. In fact, it begins far away, in ancient Egypt. The story goes that Asebu and his brother, Kwamankese, fled Egypt during a time of great turmoil. And here's where the legend gets wild. Some say Asebu was actually part of Pharaoh's army, the same army that chased the children of Israel during the Great Exodus. Imagine that for a second. While the Israelites fled from Egypt, this giant of a man supposedly led troops across deserts, rivers, and lands, trying to bring them back. But as the story unfolds, things didn't go as planned. Asebu and his men marched across Lake Chad, made their way further down to what we now know as Benin City, and eventually ended up in a place called Moore. Along the journey, disaster struck. Many of his men drowned, leaving Asebu stranded with no army to return to Pharaoh with. And so, unable to go back, he turned south, towards the coast of present-day Ghana. Here's a curious detail that oral tradition holds on to. Asebu's name itself may have come from a river called Cebu, near the River Nile. They say he lived by its banks in the Chad territory, and when he finally made it into the southern lands, the name Asebu stuck with him. Now, arriving in southern Ghana was not just the end of the journey, it was the beginning of something entirely new. With his brother Kwamankese and a prolific hunter named Nana Adzakase, Asebu laid the foundations of what would later be known as the Asebu Kingdom. And like many ancient people, they carried with them the spiritual traditions they held sacred. They brought water from their old river and kept it as a symbol of divine protection, placing it at the center of their worship. To this day, that water is still remembered in their rituals. But Asebu wasn't alone in this new land. Beside him was his sister, Amenfiwaa. And while Asebu was known for his sheer size, strength, and supernatural powers, Amenfiwaa is remembered for something else, her patience and devotion. See, Asebu was a voracious eater. His appetite matched his towering figure. And it was Amenfiwaa who had the responsibility of preparing his meals, tirelessly making sure her giant brother was fed. In many ways, she was the quiet force that sustained him. He didn't just come to settle. He came to conquer and expand. With a magical rod said to have been gifted by the gods, Asebu fought battle after battle, stretching the influence of the Asebu chiefdom far and wide. Oral history tells us that the rod, a staff he wielded with unmatched power, still exists today, a sacred relic that testifies to his might. Even more intriguing, locals will tell you that his fingerprints are still pressed into the rocks of Asebu. Imagine that, massive stone imprints left behind by the touch of one man, still visible hundreds of years later. To this day, people see those rocks as sacred proof of his existence. But Asebu's impact wasn't just limited to one kingdom. His influence reached beyond Asebu into places like Abura, another important town in Ghana's central region. Wherever he went, the stories followed: a warrior king, a giant, a man whose very presence shaped history. And so, Asebu Amenfi became more than just a man. He became a myth, a foundation, the first king of the Asebus, known to this day as Amenfiwaa. His memory lives on through the Kwamankese Festival, an annual celebration that brings people together in his honor. It's a festival of remembrance, of legacy, and of the giant who started it all. So, who really was Asebu Amenfi? Was he truly a giant who once chased the Israelites across the deserts, or a larger-than-life warrior whose deeds simply grew taller with each retelling? The answer might be buried in myth, but one thing is certain: his presence still echoes in the land, the festivals, and the sacred objects he left behind. Many kings have lived and died, but not many are still being celebrated hundreds of years later. Amenfi left behind more than just tales. He left proof. Those deep handprints on rocks in Asebu, still there. His magical staff, the one he used in his battles, people will tell you it still exists, carefully kept as a sacred relic. These aren't just objects, they are symbols, anchors of memory. Whenever the people of Asebu look at them, it's like they are reminded, yes, our ancestor was no ordinary man. And hey, Before we go deeper, if you love uncovering hidden legends like this, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Join us, because there are so many more stories from Africa and beyond that will blow your mind. Now, back to Amenfi. His story is not just about objects and relics. It's the culture, the festivals, the identity of a people. Every year, when the Kwamankese festival comes around, it's not just drums and dancing. It's a reminder that the giant still lives in their story. It's their way of saying, we remember, we honor, we belong to this legacy. What I find fascinating is how his story connects so many layers: migration from Egypt, conquest in Ghana, family ties with his brother and sister, and the spiritual traditions that carried through it all. His sister, Amenfiwaa, might not get the same spotlight, but her role was huge. She fed him, supported him, and made sure the legend had the strength to keep fighting. That's the beauty of oral history. It doesn't just celebrate the warriors, it remembers the people behind them too. And maybe that's why Asebu Amenfi's story is still told today. It's not just about a man who could press his hands into stone. It's about a people remembering where they came from, refusing to let their history be forgotten. It's about pride, identity, and the belief that greatness runs through their blood. Was Asebu really a giant who once chased the Israelites through deserts? Or was he a great warrior whose legend grew taller each time the story was retold? Honestly, we'll never know for sure. But does it even matter? The power of his story isn't in proving it with facts. It's in how it inspires, how it binds people together, and how it refuses to die. And that's the true legacy of Asebu Amenfi. A man, a myth, a giant, still walking, not in body, but in memory, in rock, in festivals, and in the heartbeat of the Asebu people. So when you next hear his name, don't think of him as just some old story from the past. Think of him as a reminder that our ancestors lived big, dreamed big, and left footprints, sometimes literally, that we can still follow today. Because giants never really die. They live on in the stories we tell. Now tell me, do you believe Asebu Amenfi was truly a giant, or just a warrior whose legend grew larger with every retelling? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you want more stories like this.